Hello, it's Caroline here, and today I wanted to take you along as I recreate some of my childhood art. As much as I love sewing and fiber arts, my first love will always be drawing. My first instinct when tackling a creative problem is to sketch it out, and drawing always ends up seeping into whatever I'm doing. Recently, I got a hold of all of my old sketchbooks from age 6 to the present. I think there might be a few missing from my elementary and middle school years, but these sketchbooks are 20 years of me making art. So I thought it'd be fun to try and recreate 2 of my old drawings to see the improvement in my skills and to see how my artistic and conceptual interests have changed. I'm going to start with one of my earliest drawings, which is this self-portrait I drew at probably around age 6 or 7. At this point, my family was living in Hawaii in my mom's childhood home. I remember my mom buying me stationery and notebooks with manga-style characters, and I would sit and copy the figures into this lined notebook. Along with copies, this notebook also has a lot of portraits of people in my life, like siblings and classmates. I picked out this drawing in particular because I can remember vaguely drawing it. I think my head was supposed to be the sun setting over the ocean. It's one of those surreal concepts that I could never really conceive of as an adult. And I love all the details in this drawing, like the missing tooth and the hairstyle with 2 pigtails. Oh, and if you're wondering what my sketches look like now, here's a little peek at my current sketchbook. For my recreation, I decided to take the concept in a slightly different direction. I wanted to try to keep the idea of scale in my new version, but instead of the sun, I'm just a huge person in the ocean, like an island, but a person. What can I say? I thought it would look good. Because this is a self-portrait, I got out a mirror to reference my face. For my new version, I'm also going to be adding in my hand to give more of a sense of depth and to add detail, as well as a little ship to give more of a sense of scale to the figure. I decided I would use watercolors for this drawing. Well, I guess now it's a painting. So I got out my light box to trace my sketch with an erasable colored pencil. Over the past 6 months, I've been getting more into digital art, but I decided to use mostly traditional for both of these 2 drawings because I thought it was keeping with the spirit of the original drawings. After tracing my sketch, I got out my watercolors and did some swatches of all of my blue tones, and then I got to work on some washes of color. I haven't really been trained in watercolors, but I am drawn to them. They have a nice texture. I also like how you can get an even wash of color. I don't tend to build up as many layers as I think you're supposed to when doing a watercolor painting, but I do try to keep in mind that it tends to look better when you have more washed out layers than a few really saturated layers. I am trying to give depth to the water by using a more saturated and deep blue the further back into the painting I get. Another cool thing with watercolors is that you can blot color away if it's not working for you. I thought my skin was looking a bit too tan, so I wet the skin area again and blotted it with a paper towel to remove some of the color. I did think about adding my glasses into this drawing because I do wear glasses normally, but I thought the sea creature version of me wouldn't wear glasses. I can't imagine they would be very useful covered in water droplets all the time. I did end up going in with a pen to add some defined lines, especially to the face and the little ship. Then I finished up with some clouds and some highlights to the water. So there we have it, my original drawing from about 20 years ago and my new version. I am really pleased with how it came out. I think I maintained some of the playfulness of the original while adding a little bit of mystery and definitely some better technical skills. Now, onto a more recent recreation. I also wanted to try my hand at recreating something from my early high school years, so from about 10 years ago. At that time, I was living with my family in Tokyo, Japan, and I was really into developing characters and comic books, and I really liked bad sci-fi TV. Not much has changed. And can we take a moment to marvel at this archival footage of myself from 2009 that I dug up? Firstly, what is happening with my hair? Secondly, I definitely knit that scarf. And thirdly,
well, it didn't work.
It sounds like the audio was recorded on like a wax cylinder. Like, what is happening? I had more options to choose from for my high school art. At this point, I knew I really loved to draw and make art, and I would always carry a sketchbook around with me. And if you want a physical representation of how art school changes your output of art, the stack on the left is all of my sketchbooks from 4 years of high school, and the stack on the right is all of my sketchbooks from 4 years of college. In any case, I landed on this drawing to recreate. It was one of the few drawings in my high school sketchbooks that felt like it was meant to be a completed piece, and I think there's a lot to go off on with this concept. In case you can't read it, it says, "This is how the world ends, in the cold." Whew, I thought it was so edgy. I think I can improve the drawing on several different fronts. Definitely anatomy and composition, and integrating the text into the image a little better as well. For this one, I did a few thumbnails to work out the composition, then I jumped into the sketch. I went with a profile view of this character and added some more winter gear so it actually looks like she is cold. Of course, you're gonna freeze to death if you don't have gloves and a hat. Like, come on. I'm also going to add the text in the background of this image. I think it'll look a little more like a page from a comic book this way, which my high school self would be very into. So after the sketch, I am going to ink it, and then I will add accents with marker, which is really similar to the original drawing. And I'm going to use my light box so I don't have to trace anything onto the final paper. What never changes after years of doing art is the inking anxiety. It feels so permanent, and I'm always afraid I'm going to smudge the last line and like ruin the whole piece. But the only way to get over it is to do it. So I'm jumping into the inking. Next, it's time to add some details with marker. And of course, I didn't check to see if the markers would smudge the pen I was using. So I had to be careful not to touch my inking with the marker. Then I added the text. I thought that I could use more tones, so I scanned in the image and messed around with it on the computer. The combination of traditional and digital is definitely my most used technique. I messed around with some different colors and backgrounds until I came up with this. I think it looks very graphic, and I think my 14-year-old self would be very impressed. So those were my attempts at recreating my childhood art. I had a lot of fun reminiscing and looking at my old sketchbooks, and it was really satisfying to see how my skills have progressed. This has also been a reminder that even though I see all the imperfections in my current work, it is a stepping stone to being better. I could not have made it to where I am with my skills now if I hadn't filled up all those many sketchbooks with like crappy doodles and experiments. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this little challenge, and I hope I've inspired you to look back at some of your old work. Thanks for watching!